How many civilizations has Earth had? For decades, this topic has kept both archaeologists and historians on their toes. While geological evidence suggests Earth has hosted no less than 12 major civilizations before our own, scholars dismiss most of it as myth. But can the geological evidence be right? If yes, what are these civilizations? Do we have any link to them at all? And lastly, what happened to them? We'll find out together in this new episode of Secret Origins. Welcome. Long before recorded history, at a time when the world's maps looked nothing like they do today, a civilization popped up in an impossible place. This was a land of eternal spring, which doubled as a paradise where people lived for 1,000 years. A kingdom far beyond the reach of the north wind. Its name was Hyperborea. According to texts written by authors Herodotus, Pindar, and Pliny the Elder, Hyperborea was no myth. It was a real place located somewhere in the far north, in what we now call the Arctic Circle, the northern Urals, and as far as Siberia. But here's what doesn't make sense. These weren't describing a frozen wasteland. They described a warm, fertile paradise where the sun never set for half the year and the people lived in complete harmony. And the mystery of this civilization does not end here. The Hyperboreans themselves were tall, luminous beings who glowed with an inner light. Not just that, but they also possessed knowledge of astronomy, mathematics, and engineering that allowed them to build magnificent temples and cities even in their remote location. However, the most intriguing evidence of Hyperborea comes from an unexpected source: ancient maps. Specifically, the Mercator maps from the 16th century that show an ice-free Arctic continent with 4 distinct rivers flowing from a central mountain. How did cartographers in the 1500s know what the Arctic looked like before the ice? Unless they were copying from far older maps created by people who had actually been there when it was habitable. And beyond the maps, modern satellite imagery has also fished out something even more unsettling. Beneath the Greenland ice sheet, ground-penetrating radar has detected geometric patterns and formations that look disturbingly artificial, all pointing to the Hyperborean civilization. So what happened to this paradise? According to the ancient texts, a catastrophe struck when Earth's axis tilted. The once beautiful spring suddenly turned to winter, almost overnight, and the warm paradise became the frozen Arctic we know today. While this happened, the survivors migrated south, seeding new civilizations with fragments of Hyperborean knowledge. Theosophy, especially the work of Madame Blavatsky, identified Hyperboreans as the second root race of humanity, beings who existed before what we consider the start of human civilization. Whether you believe that or not, one question remains unanswered. How did the ancient Greeks know about a northern paradise that existed before the ice? While Hyperborea froze in the north, deep in the jungles of Central America, another civilization was reaching heights that would baffle archaeologists for centuries: the Mayan civilization. These people didn't just build cities. They built astronomical observatories disguised as pyramids, and even calculated planetary movements with accuracy that rivals our modern computers. Since their specialty was time, the Maya built a calendar system so precise it tracked time across millions of years. All these feats without metal tools, or the wheel, and without what we'd recognize as advanced technology. At around 2000 BCE in the Yucatan Peninsula, the civilization emerged and spread across modern-day Mexico, Guatemala, Belize, and Honduras. During the Classic period, roughly 250 to 900 CE, they reached a peak, especially when cities like Tikal and Palenque became thriving metropolises housing tens of thousands. But this is what sets them apart. According to archaeologists, the pyramid at Chichen Itza creates a serpent shadow exactly twice per year. Meanwhile, the Temple of Kukulkan has 365 steps, one for each day of the solar year. Now, these weren't decorative choices at all. They were teaching tools built by people who understood celestial mechanics better than we give them credit for. By themselves, the Mayan mathematical system invented the concept of zero. This is something that took Old World civilizations centuries longer to develop. They calculated that Venus takes 583.92 days to complete its cycle, whereas modern astronomy puts it at 583.93 days. They were off by 6 hours over 500 years of observation, without telescopes. Then, around 900 CE, something happened. The cities were abandoned gradually, like a slow-motion catastrophe. Construction halted mid-project, and temples were left unfinished. To date, many argue whether bad weather conditions like drought ruined Maya, or if it was due to a political clash. But the Maya eventually dispersed like sand on a beach. However, if the Maya's gradual abandonment seems mysterious, our next civilization's destruction was far more dramatic, as it happened in a single day and night. This is the civilization that started it all, the template for every lost world story ever told. And unlike Hyperborea or the Maya, we know exactly who first described it and when. It all started with the renowned philosopher Plato. In 360 BCE, he released 2 dialogues called Timaeus and Critias, and these notes sent the world talking hard about the true origin of humanity. And you know what makes the story of Atlantis different? Plato didn't present it as fantasy. Instead, he claimed it was a historical fact, passed down through Egyptian priests to the Greek statesman Solon around 600 BCE. By these accounts, Atlantis existed 9,000 years before Plato's time, making it over 11,000 years old. What was this civilization like? In one word, Atlantis was staggering, both in size and might. An island empire larger than Libya and Asia combined, located beyond the Pillars of Hercules, what we now call the Strait of Gibraltar. As for their prowess, they built in concentric rings of land and water, with walls lined in precious metals, and their architecture set a bar so high, even for the ancient world. And when it came to politics, their naval power dominated the Mediterranean. But as they flourished without competition, they soon made a fatal mistake. In no time, arrogance and corruption consumed the people, so much that they thought themselves equal to the gods. And when pride enters the mix, punishment follows. The punishment was swift and absolute. In Plato's words, in a single day and night of misfortune, the island of Atlantis disappeared in the depths of the sea. As the dark age covered the Atlanteans' hearts, earthquakes and floods visited them. Total annihilation from the surface of the earth. It was so thorough that for 2,400 years, people debated whether it ever existed, yet the evidence keeps emerging. In 2013, divers found circular structures off Spain's coast matching Plato's descriptions. In 2014, a shipwreck near Sicily yielded 87 ingots of orichalcum, the rare metal Plato said coated Atlantis buildings. Meanwhile, scientists had previously dismissed orichalcum as mythical. Now we're finding it. This causes us to wonder, what if Plato was right all along? Or was it something else entirely? Because while Atlantis sank in the Atlantic, Another massive civilization was thriving in a place most people still can't find on a map. Do you know that another civilization bears an uncanny resemblance to Plato's Atlantis? It was called Kumari Kandam, a magnificent continent that started with the ancient Tamil people of southern India. According to the 15th century Indian text called Skanda Purana, Kumari Kandam was a vast landmass stretching south of India, connecting Madagascar, India and Australia, all in 49 territories. It was so great a place that they hosted 3 great Tamil Sangams. These are literary academies where poets and scholars gathered to preserve knowledge. A civilization so advanced that the Tamils credit it as the birthplace of their entire culture and language. But sadly, the ocean wanted it back after some time. According to the texts, 3 massive floods struck over thousands of years, and each one swallowed more land, cities, and people than the previous one. With time, these progressive deluges forced survivors to migrate north, bringing with them fragments of Kumari Kandam's wisdom. However, things get interesting from here. Between India and Sri Lanka lies the ancient Adam's Bridge, also called Rama Setu, an 18-mile chain of limestone shoals that looks almost artificial. Also, marine archaeology has found submerged structures off Tamil Nadu's coast. And the ancient city of Pumpahar, mentioned in Tamil literature, was discovered underwater exactly where the texts said it would be. What if they all point to the Kumari Kandam people? To top it, there's geological backup too. 14,500 years ago, sea levels were 400 feet lower than they are now. This means that vast coastal areas that are now underwater were once habitable land. At the end of the last ice age, the timing of the Tamil flood perfectly aligns with the period when melting glaciers drowned coastlines worldwide. Could it be what we are thinking? While coastal civilizations drowned beneath rising seas, an impossible city was being built. High in the Bolivian Andes, at 12,549 feet above sea level, Tiwanaku wasn't just high altitude, it was massive. At its peak, around 800 CE, this city housed up to 20,000 people in one of the most inhospitable environments on Earth. They built pyramids, carved massive stone gates, and engineered sophisticated water management systems that still function today. But above all of these feats, it is the adjacent site of Puma Punku that makes engineers lose sleep. Imagine stone blocks weighing over 100 tons, some stretching 26 feet long, fitted together with such precision that you can't slide a knife blade between them. No mortar in between, just stone on stone, cut with laser-like accuracy. The blocks feature complex interlocking joints, H-shaped grooves, perfectly straight edges, and right angles so precise they look machine-made. To date, modern engineers admit they couldn't replicate this with primitive tools. Yet mainstream archaeology insists the Tiwanaku people, who had no written language and no wheels, somehow achieved this around 500 to 1000 CE using only stone hammers and copper tools. On the other hand, alternative researchers point to something else. Some blocks show evidence of being poured or molded rather than carved, and the precision? Off by less than a millimeter across surfaces spanning several feet. Perhaps this was their tactic. Arthur Poznansky, who studied the site for decades, claimed astronomical alignments date Tiwanaku to 15,000 BCE, long before any known civilization should have existed there. Graham Hancock goes further, suggesting this was part of a global pre-Ice Age civilization with technology we've lost. What if this timing gave them the crazy engineering advantage they had? But speaking of timing, let's talk about the civilization that is widely known to precede all civilizations. While Tiwanaku's builders carved impossible stones in the Andes, something far larger was allegedly thriving across the entire Pacific Ocean. Not an island or a coastline, an entire continent called Mu. And it all started with Augustus Le Plongeon, a 19th century archaeologist studying Mayan ruins. According to the Mayan texts, Mu was a great civilization that came before all others, a motherland that was swallowed by the sea. But while Augustus started the conversation, it was James Churchward who turned this into a full-blown alternative history. In 1926, Churchward published his bombshell, a three-part series on Mu. In these books, Churchward confessed that 50 years earlier, while serving in India, a temple priest showed him ancient tablets written in a dead language called Nagamaya. And these tablets told the story of Mu. According to Churchward, Mu stretched from the Marianas to Easter Island, from Hawaii to the Southern Pacific, larger than South America. What's more, 64 million people lived there in 7 major cities. They were called the Nakal, and in Churchward's words, they were superior in many respects to our own civilization. The evidence? Easter Island's massive Moai statues mark the mountain peaks of sunken Mu. Churchward also labeled Nanmadol's megaliths in Micronesia as remnants of Mu's architecture. Even the Yonaguni monument off Japan with its underwater stairs and terraces is not left out of Mu's proposed submerged cities. But suddenly, at about 12,000 years ago, this massive continent sank into the ground. Yes. Covered by 50 million square miles of water in a single night. However, mainstream science dismisses Mu entirely. With the study of plate tectonics, we learn that continents don't just sink like that. Plus, Churchward never really produced those tablets for verification. But in spite of these doubts, the Pacific ruins remain. The identical pyramid designs across distant cultures remain. And the flood myths from 200+ cultures worldwide all describe the same catastrophe happening at the same time. Was Mu real? Or is it a 20th century invention that borrowed heavily from much older flood legends? Whatever the answer, our next civilization brought a greater debate to the surface. How do you explain a civilization that thrived underground? You heard that right. While other civilizations rose and fell on the surface, this one thrived where it shouldn't have been possible. Deep underground. Its name, Agartha. Now, Agartha wasn't just a hidden city. It was an entire kingdom existing inside Earth's hollow interior, complete with its own sun, lush landscapes, and an advanced civilization that's been there for millennia. But no one knew about them until the 17th century, when astronomer Edmund Halley proposed that Earth consisted of nested spheres separated by atmospheres. By the 19th century, esoteric traditions merged this with ancient stories to reveal Agartha, a massive underground cavity housing enlightened beings. From Hindu texts speaking of the Nagas, half-human serpent beings living in Patala, the lowest realm, to Tibetan lamas describing hidden tunnels beneath Mount Kailash, they all point directly to this underground paradise. Not proof enough? Then why did the Nazis believe it enough to send expeditions to Tibet in the 1930s? searching for entrances. During the Cold War, the CIA was known to embark on a classified search around the same regions the Nazis had looked. Were they seeking out the same thing? We may never know. However, we know that even today, certain regions around Tibet remain blurred on satellite maps, with radars hinting at massive underground structures. On the flip side, modern seismology has proven Earth's core is solid metal, not hollow. But believers argue that Agartha exists in a different dimension, accessible only through specific consciousness states or hidden tunnel networks. Real or not, one question haunts researchers. Why do so many cultures describe the same underground kingdom? While legends speak of underground kingdoms, history records something equally remarkable happening in Mesopotamia around 2334 BCE. The Akkadian Empire. Known as humanity's first multinational empire, this kingdom united diverse peoples under one ruler, Sargon of Akkad, a man whose story sounds like propaganda. First, the texts say he was abandoned as a baby in a basket on the Euphrates, then raised by a gardener high enough to conquer all of Mesopotamia. Sounds eerily familiar to the biblical Moses, right? For over a century, the Akkadians ruled from the Mediterranean to the Persian Gulf, establishing systems of governance that every empire after them would copy. According to the Mesopotamian texts, these were the people who created the first postal system and set a standard hard for other civilizations to rival. Then, around 2218 BCE, it all collapsed. Through bouts of drought and internal rebellion, the empire that seemed unstoppable crumbled in decades. But here's the strangest part. We still don't know where their capital city was. To date, Akkad, the seat of the world's first empire, has never been found. But on the subject of hidden civilizations, our list has just begun. What if the greatest mystery isn't a lost city, but a hidden island that might still exist? Enter Avalon. Avalon appears in Geoffrey of Monmouth's 1136 Chronicle, not told as myth, but as a solid historical fact. According to the Chronicle, this was the island where King Arthur's sword Excalibur was forged, and where the wounded king was taken after his final battle. It gets weird from here. Avalon is known as an island of apple orchards, where inhabitants lived naturally, practicing magic and worshipping nature itself. Can you believe that? For a piece of evidence, people point to Glastonbury Tor in Somerset, England, surrounded by marshes that once made it appear island-like. This is the leading candidate. And the archaeological artifacts present? They all date to Neolithic times. In addition, scholars still debate how the spiral terraces wind up the hill. Are those natural or artificial? The line keeps blurring. But this is the final bomb. Glastonbury sits between the Mendip and Quantock Hills, precisely where medieval texts placed Avalon's territory. How much of a coincidence could this be? But if Avalon hid itself in mist, this next civilization hides behind mountains, and possibly behind reality itself. Shambhala. According to Tibetan Buddhist texts, Shambhala was a pure land ruled by enlightened kings, protected by 8 mountain ranges somewhere between Tibet and Mongolia. But this is no spiritual metaphor. In reality, ancient texts provide specific geographic markers describing rivers, valleys, and distances with crazy precision. James Hilton's 1933 book, Lost Horizon, introduced it to the West as Shangri-La, but Tibetan monks had been searching for it for centuries. And in 1963, monk Tulshuk Lingpa led 12 disciples on an expedition to find its entrance. They never returned. In the 1930s, the same Nazis' expedition sent to uncover Agartha was also extended to unroot Shambhala, especially because Shambhala's history held the promise of something better: advanced knowledge. Also, the mystery surrounding the CIA's coincidental search floats around this civilization as well. And the government wasn't the only one looking. Matter of fact, the search already began 100 years earlier. In the 1800s, Hungarian scholar Sándor Kőrösi first introduced Shambhala to European scholarship. In 1856, Madame Blavatsky traveled to India specifically to find it, and later linked it to Atlantis and Lemuria, and as the texts say, Shambhala might still be out there, waiting to be discovered. But while mystics search for hidden kingdoms, archaeologists stumbled upon something that shouldn't exist: a temple complex that predates everything we thought we knew. Long before modern civilization, there were whispers of a city that rose from the Arabian deserts like a mirage: Iram of the Pillars. Ancient traditions describe it as a real civilization that flourished in the southern Arabian Peninsula, most likely hitting peak glory between 3000 and 2000 BCE, right at the crossroads of early trade routes. Iram was known far and wide to be unimaginably wealthy, with its power built on control of frankincense, myrrh, and desert commerce. But that was not its only vantage point. What set it apart were its structures: a lineup of towering pillars, vast halls, and architectural feats so advanced that they became legendary. Now these pillars weren't just decorative, they symbolized dominance, permanence, and defiance against nature itself. Iram believed it had mastered the desert. However, this magnificent trait of Iram of the Pillars was also its undoing. Ancient accounts speak of arrogance. Gradually, pride set in, and this blossoming city believed itself to be untouchable. Then, suddenly, it vanished, right into the ground, without a single gradual decline or any recorded war. Just burial. Geological evidence suggests that intense sandstorms or sudden climate shifts swallowed the city whole, sealing it beneath layers of sand, as though planet Earth was tired of its dark age. As the sands closed over Iram of the Pillars, civilization didn't disappear. It changed location. To the north, between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, something unmatched emerged around 4500 BCE, the Sumerian civilization. Now, unlike others, the Sumerians didn't slowly evolve into civilization. They appeared fully formed, with cities, laws, writing, astronomy, mathematics, and monumental architecture already in place. This is what unsettles researchers. The Sumerians built ziggurats, massive stepped structures aligned with the heavens. They tracked planets, divided time into hours and minutes, and wrote in cuneiform, the first known written language. Can you believe that? This was a civilization whose tablets read like the work of people who already knew what they were doing. But the most intriguing of all their wonders were their records of their kings, advanced beings who lived for thousands of years and ruled with admiration. But unfortunately, this great civilization was also swallowed up by disasters. This is one thing we notice across all 12 civilizations. They meet a sudden end. But does this mean they never existed to start with? Tell us what you think in the comments, and like the video if you want us to explore more ancient civilizations. Keep your minds open, and until we meet again,